Good evening, hello and welcome to a new edition of the Daily Debate. I'm Mohammed Abdurrahim. After a decade of various challenges, Turkey and Egypt, those two key regional powers are really getting closer to each other. Today, His Excellency President Al-Sisi welcomed his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who is making his first official visit to Egypt in more than a decade to augment the relations between both regional powers. In a press conference at Al-Ittihadiyya Palace in Cairo on Wednesday, President Al-Sisi stressed that Egypt and Turkey are opening together a new chapter to enrich their bilateral ties and send them on the right track. Tonight, along with my distinguished guest, His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Miligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, will shed light on the visit of His Excellency, the Turkish President, to Egypt. That comes amid intensified Egyptian and Qatari efforts to de-escalate the situation in Gaza and ease the humanitarian catastrophe there. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Allow us, please, and allow us, dear viewers, first to watch about our topic for tonight, and then come back and start our discussion. Please stay with us.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan arrived in Cairo on Wednesday to hold extensive talks with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The visit is historical as this is Erdogan's first official visit to Egypt since 2012, while both countries are working to improve their ties. According to the Egyptian presidency, President al-Sisi and President Erdogan met to discuss several regional issues and challenges. Their talks addressed the ceasefire in Gaza and the delivery of humanitarian aid to people on the Strip. Additionally, Presidents al-Sisi and Erdogan held extensive talks to push forward ongoing efforts aimed at enhancing bilateral relations between Egypt and Turkey. In their first press conference in Cairo, President al-Sisi welcomed his Turkish counterpart Erdogan in Cairo, saying that both countries are opening together a new chapter to enrich their bilateral ties and set them on the right track, stressing Egypt's appreciation for the historical relations with Turkey as well as the cultural and civilization legacy the two countries share. During his speech at the joint press conference with his Turkish counterpart, President al-Sisi also highlighted the continuation of popular communication between the two countries over the past 10 years as trade and investment relations witnessed steady growth during that period. In his speech, President al-Sisi pointed out that interests in strengthening joint coordination and taking advantage of the two countries' position in the region, which contribute to achieving peace and stability, as well as providing an environment conducive to achieving prosperity. President al-Sisi expressed pride in the level of cooperation existing between Egypt and Turkey regarding the rapid access of the largest possible amount of humanitarian aid to the people in the Gaza Strip, taking into account the restrictions imposed by Israeli authorities on the entry of this aid, which causes aid trucks to enter at a slow pace irrelevant to the needs of Gaza Strip residents. In his speech, President al-Sisi also pointed out to the two countries' emphasis on the need to strengthen consultations on the Libyan file in a way that helps hold presidential and legislative elections and unify the country's military establishment. During the press conference, President al-Sisi welcomed the current calmness in the eastern Mediterranean region, expressing his aspirations to build on to resolve the existing disputes in the region and make the most of the natural resources available there. President al-Sisi added that during the discussions, they stressed their common interest in cooperation in Africa to support its development, aiming to achieve stability. At the conclusion of his speech, President al-Sisi expressed his aspiration to accept President Erdogan's invitation to visit Turkey next April to continue working to upgrade the bilateral relations of the two countries in various fields. The visit of President Erdogan to Cairo represents an opportunity to create new alliances to confront the issues besetting the region. The significant Egyptian-Turkish rapprochement highlights the rapid regional developments. As regional powers, the two states decided to reduce tensions to create a new regional order based on managing conflicts and neutrality, aiming to achieve the most interest possible and to impose a new regional and geopolitical equation that obliged relative stability in the region.
Thank you, Abir Hussein, for this report. We're back here in the studio with Ambassador Medhat Miligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Mr. Ambassador, how do you view the Turkish president's visit to Egypt, the first in over a decade, especially in light of the current volatile situation in the region?
Well, this visit has multiple axes. I mean, first of all, we have to look at it from a bilateral perspective. As you mentioned, and as Abir mentioned in her report, this was quite important that Egypt and Turkey resume their relationship. Actually, it shouldn't have been so long. But of course, as Middle Eastern, this visit will take away every grudge that we had before due to this relation. Of course, we have divergence in point of view, and this is normal. I mean, we have our point from religious and using the religion in politics, which maybe the Turks have another point of view regarding this issue. And of course, we both have our common points in various issues, especially the one about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that is going on now for over 120 days. So I believe that as two superpowers, regional superpowers in the region, the relation should really reach a level where it meets the aspiration of both people of both countries. I believe that this visit at this moment is very important. Once we have passed the protocol issue of the visit, there is a lot of cooperation fields that we can tackle together. And Turkey is doing a great job economically in the area, and we know that the amount of Turkish exports, not just to Egypt, but to many countries. As you know, I was ambassador to Cameroon, and I have visited other African countries. The Turkish exports are booming, and maybe we can use some of their expertise in this field to boom our expertise as well. We have the know-how, we have good industries that we can export.
And we are the gate to Africa.
Exactly. And we are even closer to Africa than the Turks. But maybe their ways of marketing, of sales, or all these tactics, we can use some of them to enhance our exports to Africa. Having said that, of course, it's very important, the visit from another perspective, which is the international perspective. Of course, the most eminent issue right now is the Israeli genocide on the Palestinian people. And this area specifically, I think we have an exact point of view. Both of us, we have a very similar point of view towards the issue. Since we both have diplomatic relations with Israel, and we both had long history of cooperation even with Israel in some fields. So I think that now this situation forces us to take a certain measures regarding this conflict, especially that we cannot leave this war crime that is taking place unpunished until this moment. So I think coordination of both regional superpowers is very essential at this crucial juncture of this conflict that the Israelis are approaching Rafah, and this might have very serious repercussions on the Palestinians, on the Egyptians, on the whole area of the Middle East. Right. There is also another very important point of view and another important issue to tackle, which is the Libyan question. As you know, the Turks are involved to a certain degree in Libya, and we have asked all foreign forces to leave the Libyans to take a decision about their future and how it should be crafted. And I think that this was one of the issues that both leaders have spoken about today. Egypt has its reservation about the expansion of the Turks into Libya, and we have our national security issues and our red line in a certain area that should not be crossed. And I believe it was very important to hear this message firsthand from President Sisi himself, who definitely have mentioned it to Libya, knowing how close they are to the current regime in Libya.
Right.
I think those are mainly the main targets of the discussions that took place between the two leaders today.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, both countries reinstated their respective ambassadors last summer, right? But even in the 10 or plus years or so, where there was some political tension, I think that the economic cooperation was there. And the trade exchange was always there, right? But I'm sure that both Cairo and Ankara would be looking to work on developing that.
Exactly. Well, this is, as we always have learned in diplomacy and in international relations, that it's always based on mutual interest. And this is, let me put it this way, this was the thin line that kept the two countries able to communicate through the economic window, through the trade window. And this is what enabled this visit to happen today. I mean, there was not a full and complete rupture, although at a certain point the media was taking a very rough stance, rough turn against each other in the media and so on. But I believe that both countries have this under control in order not to reach a point of a no return.
Right.
It was very important that both countries that understood the importance of keeping a relationship.
And the relationship, sorry to interrupt you, I would assume it's normal to have a good, friendly, brotherly relationship between two peoples that share a lot in their history,
exactly,
in their culture.
History and everything. Not just that, actually. I mean, we have to understand that what we have in common is far more than the divergence that we had, both of us. The idea is that the Turks had a certain point of view regarding the last regime, that the Egyptian people have refused, that they did not want to continue, and thus they took this position from Egypt. It wasn't Egypt, actually, who started this. It was the refusal of the non-acceptance of the Egyptians and the demonstration that took place in Egypt before the revolution of the 30th of June 2013. I mean, this was the turning point of the Egyptian history in regarding the regime. This is what brought President Sisi by the desire of the Egyptian people to power, and this is what irritated Turkey at the time. I believe that now, with this visit, it shows that Turkey is taking another turn in the relationship, and actually it is not a meeting that took place in any capital or behind closed doors or anything.
And Egypt has been always open to reconciliation and open to... and has great relations with everybody, I think.
Exactly. I mean, we never had a hatred relationship, and that's what enabled us today to receive President Erdogan. And as you have seen, and as we have all seen, the visit was celebrated not just by the president and the Egyptian administration, but also by the people who were happy to have a relationship. As you mentioned it, there is a deep and very strong relations and ties between Egypt and Turkey throughout history. So it's not a surprise that we are resuming today what was, I don't want to say a mistake, but what was an obstacle in the way of a normal relationship between two very important and very strong superpowers, regional superpowers in the area of the Middle East.
All right. President Sisi said today in the press conference with the Turkish president, and we are quoting President Sisi, both countries are opening together a new chapter. So the question here is, how would this new chapter help reshape the dynamics in the Middle East?
Well, First of all, having those two superpowers, and I insist on calling them regional superpowers, having them agree on one thing, this is a threat to whoever wants to meddle in the Middle East and destroy it. I think that the rapprochement between those two countries at this juncture of the Palestinian issue, at this moment where theoretically this war is getting to an end, either a catastrophic one or maybe, and that's our hope, a peaceful one. And we'll come to this later. But I think that Rafah is the last point. Whether we like it or not, this is the last point. I mean, there is nowhere else this war can take place in. I mean, this is the last point. So eventually, that's what brings me to say that this is the last episode of this war. We hope that we will not have to cross this because the situation is very fluid and very volatile, and we can see anything that could happen. We can see maybe hundreds and thousands of dead daily, and this is what we don't want to see. We are squeezing 1,500,000 approximately, which is a huge number of people. We are squeezing them in a very, very teeny tiny area.
And they were the ones asked by Israel to move to the south.
And that's the plan. I mean, there is a lot of scenarios that we've been hearing about. One of the scenarios is that they want to squeeze them in this area, and maybe at a later stage they will bring boats to forcibly once again displace them. The Egyptian option is not available. It was never available anyway. But anyway, since Egypt is taking this stance, so Israel is thinking of another thing. There were countries actually who actually approved of receiving a few thousand Palestinians in their countries, including the United States, by the way. And maybe this is the Israeli plan, is to evacuate the Palestinians by sea to other countries and get rid of the Gaza headache, as they call it. This is one of the scenarios. Let's hope that it will not happen because, I mean, whether we like it or not, this is against the international law. And this is what Egypt had been warning from the beginning of the war in 7th of October. From that day, and we've been warning from two things: evacuating the Palestinians or forcibly displacing them on one side, or the liquidation of the Palestinian cause. And those two issues we've been very clear about. So this is a scenario that Israel is contemplating and is thinking that without Egypt I can still do it. Let's hope that this will not happen because in all cases it will have repercussions. However, when it comes to the Turkish issue, I believe that having a common point of view between us and the Turks will definitely give a certain perspective to other countries who are seeing how the region is looking at the Israeli issue, the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And this will help to formulate a new point of view regarding how those countries are looking into the matter. And this is very important at this juncture.
Yes. Mr. Ambassador, in the press conference, the President Sisi expressed pride in the level of cooperation existing between Egypt and Turkey regarding the rapid access of the largest possible amount of humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza, the Palestinians, of course, in Gaza. Again, how can such close cooperation now between Ankara and Cairo bring help to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza?
One cannot deny that the relations between the Turks and the Israeli have a high level of cooperation. We've all heard about reports mentioning that at the beginning of the war, before the situation was quite clear, that there were ships going from Turkey to Israel to provide food and other commodities to the Israeli people, which means that the relationship between both countries are in a good level that permit maybe Turkey to exert some pressure on the Israeli to accept this point of view and to understand also how firm Egypt is about its conditions that it has mentioned ever since this war started and even before this war, which is entering humanitarian aid sufficient to the Palestinian. I mean, one track every now and then is not enough to call it sufficient. We need to enter thousands of tons of humanitarian aid, not to mention medical aid and other supplies that the Palestinians are in dire strait for, and in need for. And the second thing is that the Turks can exert some pressure in order to find a peaceful relation to the solution. Egypt has mentioned several times that it will not accept the liquidation. And I think that even the Americans understand this, which are a very important factor into this equation. The American position is very important to convince, and we've seen that the situation is becoming more and more far, especially between the two leaders. I'm talking here about Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and President Biden. Both of them are having diversion, a clear diversion in their point of view. We even with the European, we've heard yesterday Josep Borrell talking about the necessity of not supplying arms to Israel. This is the first time that we hear this from a spokesperson and the one who represents the international European community, that we have to stop arming Israel in order to prevent it from committing more killing. I don't want, I mean, they will not call it a genocide or a war crime, but at least more killing of the Palestinians. Very soon, in a week maybe or 8 days, Israel should submit its first report to South Africa through the International Court of Justice as
and South Africa has filed a new complaint
about
the
because
aggression
Israel
on
actually
Rafah.
it's supposed to, in this report that it should submit in a week or 8 days, as I said, it should submit the steps that were undertaken by the Israeli government to prevent the committing of a genocide or inciting to commit genocide. Until today, we heard Ben Gvir and Smotrich saying very rough and very bad declarations about the situation. They even reached to the point where they mentioned Egypt and consider it as accomplice with what happened, as if Egypt is incapable of protecting its borders. And let me here say one thing. Egypt does not provide any armament to Hamas or to any Palestinian resistance movement.
Yeah.
However, I believe that this is the right of Palestinians to be armed, just like the rights of the Israelis.
That's what international law believes.
Exactly. I mean, those are people under occupation, and they are entitled to take every measure to defend themselves. Actually, it's not Israel that is in need for self-defense. It is the Palestinians, because they are the one under occupation and under oppression. So according to the international law, we have the right, if we want to supply the Palestinians with armor. But we don't do this because we believe in peace as a strategic movement and a strategic policy of this country. So we have to be very careful about using the narrative of the Israeli and propagate it in a way that shows as if this is the right one. It is not the right one. It is the Palestinians who need the self-defense right and not the Israelis.
Right.
And we have to understand that the root cause of all this is occupation. Once there is no occupation, then in this case, Israel can talk about the right of self-defense.
Right. Before we watch another report, Mr. Ambassador, and the viewers, this time about the big economic relations between Egypt and Turkey. Just one final question here. As you mentioned, of course, Libya was on the table. We understand Sudan and Somalia. Can you give us just a little word about Somalia and Sudan, and how can the Egyptian-Turkish partnership now help solve those problems?
Well, Turkey have always had good relations with Sudan, and they wanted actually at a certain point to have a kind of facilitation into the ports of Sudan. We heard this long ago, and I think this shows a certain ambition of the Turks to have very good ties with Sudan in order to enable it to have some facilities on the Red Sea and so on. But this is not the issue. Any good relation between Egypt and Turkey will solve any other Middle Eastern conflict.
So it's good for the region, point final.
It's good for the region, of course, especially when there is a lot of challenges facing the whole area, including Turkey itself. I mean, we all know that Turkey is an Asian European country, just like Egypt is an African Asian country. So the Turks had always ambition to expand, and this is actually what the president himself have said. Well, of course, he said this when he was talking about the involvement of Turkey in Libya and how the heart of the people of Turkey is longing to have good relations with Libyans in order to, they feel that they are not just stopped by their boundaries of the Turkish frontiers. No, their boundaries are large far than that. So what I want to say at the end is that any rapprochement, as I said, between the Egyptians and the Turks is going to benefit the whole region, whether we are talking about Libya, of course, in first instance, and then Sudan, and of course the Israeli conflict, and even our projects in the Mediterranean. We are talking here about mainly our friends from Greece and Cyprus. Yeah. And I think that having a good relation with the Turks will definitely help to advance and develop these programs. And I'm sure that once we established a good relation between Egypt and Turkey, a lot of other cooperation fields are going to emerge by themselves.
Indeed. Mr. Ambassador, dear viewers, let's now watch a report about the huge economic ties between Cairo and Ankara, and come back and resume our discussion.
The visit of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to Egypt gives a new impetus to enhancing economic cooperation and trade exchange between both countries, especially since they are linked with distinguished historical and economic relations. The economic relations between Egypt and Turkey have witnessed great activity recently at all levels, which has been reflected in the growth of the volume of trade and investment between the two nations. In his press conference with Turkish President Erdogan, President Sisi underscored that Egypt is currently Turkey's first trade partner in Africa, and it is one of the most important destinations for Egyptian exports, thanks to the great feasibility of joint work between the business sectors of the two countries. In this regard, the two states seek to raise trade exchange to $15 billion over the next few years, enhance joint investments, and open new areas of cooperation. The latest Egyptian commercial representation reports show that Turkish investments are among the most important foreign investments in Egypt, and that Turkish companies are among the largest foreign companies contributing to Egyptian exports, whether to Turkey, the European Union, or the United States. According to the Minister of Trade and Industry, the recent period has witnessed a great movement and demand from Turkish investors to pump new investments into the Egyptian market, especially in light of the recent boom in bilateral ties between the two countries and the activity of mutual official visits between officials of the two nations. Turkish investments are geographically widespread in Egypt and are also present at the level of medium and small projects, and investments are in industrial sectors in which Turkish companies excel, which contributed to the transfer of technology, industrial and marketing knowledge to Egypt, and the diversification of investments in various sectors. The visit of Turkish President Erdogan to Egypt will enhance economic cooperation exchange between the two nations, thanks to the growing political relations that greatly support trade and investment ties.
Thank you, Abir, again, and welcome back. Mr. Ambassador, Egypt is a member of the BRICS, Turkey is a member of the G20. I mean, they are both huge markets, big economies. How can we push that, to the interests of both countries at the utmost efficient level?
Through cooperation, and cooperation in good faith and goodwill. Actually, as you know, Turkey is excelling in several domains and fields. And Egypt as well has its own fields, and they could benefit from the know-how that we have in various fields, while we can benefit from their excel expertise in other fields. I think the most important, as I said from the beginning, the step is here. It was made. The Turkish president came to Egypt in goodwill, and he met with the president. He came especially to resume these strong relations that we always had, and to, as the President Sisi himself said it, to open a new chapter. And this chapter is now open for us to write in it what we want. And what we want is very clear. In this point of our history, where we are facing an economic crisis, the Turks can help a lot in this field, and we can also help. Let's be clear that both countries have input into this. Egypt also has an input. Because some people, I believe, sometimes they see relation as a one-sided relation. This is not true.
You mentioned earlier, the good relations with Egypt from the Turkish point of view. On one side, it will help Turkey in the Mediterranean gas conflicts, for instance, or issues that it has with Greece.
Exactly.
Or Cyprus. We are friends with Greece and Turkey.
Of course. But let me also mention another branch, which is Africa. Africa is very important to both of us. And as I said at the beginning earlier, as an ambassador who served in Africa before, I have seen how they expanded their expertise into Africa, how the Turkish exportations is reaching Africa. And we have to benefit from the network that they have into invading, if I can say this word, invading more African markets. We need this joint projects. And there is a lot of fields that we can actually seize the opportunity of the Turkish excelling in those fields to emphasize our capacities and our capacity building even with Egyptian workers and so on. So I mean that the fields are endless, but the idea is to put our hands on the first step. And the first step was already done today. It was established today by resuming serious relationship with this presidential level visit. I think this is enough for all the people who are interested into getting into new market, to getting into new industries, into developing any kind of relationship with third parties. This can be done with the help of the Turks and with the help of Egyptians, depending on the field we are choosing. So I believe that this is going to open. That's why a lot of media are referring to this visit as an historical visit. Why it's historical? Because it's going to start a new relation and new type of cooperation between the Egyptian and Turks. And we will see in the near future how this is going to expand for the benefit of both countries and both people.
Right. Ms. Ambassador, you talked earlier about how important for the region is the normalization of Egyptian-Turkish relations. Now I'm going to ask you, how important is it for, global diplomacy? Because Egypt has its global weight in the diplomatic field, and Turkey has its also big weight in global diplomacy. So how together can these two big Middle Eastern superpowers together increase their already big weight in world diplomacy?
Well, let's say first of all that Turkey has already built many fields of cooperation in third parties countries. I mean, we're talking about mainly Europe, where they export a lot, and we can through them also expand our products to Europe, although we have our own way. The idea is that between Egypt and Turkey, once the relation is there, as I said before, we can expand it. I don't want to think about a certain limitation to these powers, but what I want to say is that it's definitely going to be beneficial for both countries in ways that we can both craft, how we can use this good relation now that we are having with the Turks into expanding both of our capacities into other countries and other areas of the world. They are excelling in certain fields, and we can use them to boost our economy to those fields, and so they can. So we can both cooperate to reach other countries, as I said at the beginning, and I think this is going to be very helpful to both economies.
Indeed. And finally, we have to end by talking about the just Palestinian cause and the humanitarian suffering in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian lands. Again, we are seeing now efforts led by Egypt, Qatar, and the US to try and reach some sort of deal that would reach a ceasefire that would hopefully turn into a permanent ceasefire, and of course with the exchange of hostages and detainees. Today's development, this new chapter between Cairo and Ankara, how can it help fasten or speed up this goal, the achievement of this goal, or at least stop the Israeli wildness, the Israeli craziness that's engulfing the occupied Palestinian lands?
I think that the main step is never going to be from the region, unfortunately. Not because that we are not capable of creating an effect on the Israelis, but because we are not supplying Israel with weapons. The countries that are supplying Israel with weapons are the ones who can and will exert the pressure on Israel to abide by the international law. And although the Egyptian-Turkish position that is identical on this issue, but they are not going to be the only players. They can craft initiatives, but in order to implement it, we have to have our friends and the supporters of Israel stand by it. And make no mistake, the Americans, although they have a divergence in the point of view with Israel, but they are not against the destruction of Hamas in any way. They're just against the high number of casualties that is going to happen in the way to destroy Hamas. If Israel can destroy Hamas and any other resistance movement in the area, the American would welcome that. They will not be against, as long as the number of casualties does not exceed a high number. And unfortunately,
but again, every time I hear that this issue about high number,
it is already a high number.
Yeah, and the Americans had said before, like, we don't want too many Palestinians to be killed. But what is too many for them? I mean, this is what we want to know.
I will not go
every
into that.
single life is sacred. Every single human life is sacred in all religions and in all.
Yes, but this is our point of view. In other doctrines, this is not as important as it is to us. I'm sorry, unfortunately, this is the reality. And we have to understand that as long as the political interest of the United States are not damaged with countries who are against what is going on in Israel, then the United States will not really exert the effort that we are looking for and we are aspiring to. This is the reality of things, and we have to understand. The Americans are the only one who can really exert the pressure on Israel, because if they threaten not to give any more arms to Israel or any more ammunition to Israel, if it continues its war, then this war will stop the same second. But so far we didn't hear this from the Americans. That's why I always said, and I said it before on this same program, I said, I only believe in what the Americans do, not in what they say, because they are giving us a huge number of multiple and opposite message at the same time. They preach for the two-state solution, but they never do anything about it. I mean, there is a very good American saying that actually says, put your money where your mouth is. And the Americans are always talking about the two-state solution. They always talk about the right of the Palestinian to autodetermination. All right, that's good, we understand this. Then what are you planning to do about this? Actually, nothing. They didn't do much about it. We have the Oslo agreements 30 years ago. Hamas was not even created back then. And nevertheless, we never had a Palestinian state that is built on the frontiers of the 4th of June 1967, which are what the international law and what the UN Security Council resolutions talk about. So that's why we never had a Palestinian state. And now they are not talking anymore about a Palestinian state. I'm talking here about Israel. Israel is not convinced about having an Israeli state anymore, at least not this government.
Right. And they've eaten up much of
not just that, I mean, not one government,
lands, yes.
ever since the Oslo agreements until today, stopped the building of the settlements, or as we call it, the colonies, on the Palestinian territories. And as
but
many
really,
politicians have said...
As we must end it here, can any state, has any state over the course of history been able to survive like that? I mean, you're going to be at wars for your entire existence? I mean, has any state ever done that over the course of history?
Unfortunately, not in recent history, but in old histories it happened. Unfortunately, it happened. But what I'm talking about in current history, in recent events, in recent class of things, this never happened before. And I hope that it will end at a certain point, and we are going to resume talks about a peace process, and that will end this endless war.
Your Excellency Ambassador Medhat Miligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you, dear viewers, for watching the Daily Debate. Goodbye.